What's a vertical file? It's a library collection of small publications used to answer questions. On Vertical File, we talk about information and knowledge management in many different fields, covering the practical, the technical, and the philosophical. This is Vertical File by Sutron Global. Welcome to Vertical File. I'm John Connolly, your host. Today, we're joined by Robyn Rebollo, who has more than 25 years of experience in information management, libraries, and knowledge management. Robyn has successfully assisted legal and corporate clients negotiate software as a service contracts and to optimize their subscriptions. She's also implemented customized programs through knowledge consultancy and fully managed information services for top law firms and corporations. She holds a master's in library and information science from the Catholic University of America and resides in the New York City metropolitan area. Robyn, welcome to the program.
Hi, John. Thanks for having me.
I wanted to start with a topic that has rapidly become near and dear to most people on the internet, and that's artificial intelligence, AI. You've started to do some work in auditing how organizations use AI, specifically looking to the legal organizations, the law firms that you have worked with and in. But I'm hoping you can give us an overview of the work that you've been doing there and kind of what does it mean?
Sure. Well, it really focuses more on the vendors, right? The vendors, the legal research information providers that make up all of the services that our attorneys and our professional staff use, either for legal research or business intelligence, business development, financial research. So I started thinking about that, like, what type of simple audit could I do to ensure that the vendors, had some type of risk management in place, within themselves, but, kind of concentrating on 4 principles. And that would include human oversight, transparency, fairness, and data privacy, as well as security.
Feels like you're really speaking to the information ecosystem to support the organization that you're working with, right? That the vendors, the third parties, the subsidiary groups that are going to have an influence on how business is done.
Correct. And that all stems from, right, using, open data versus closed data for a lot of these services. And, essentially how they protect that data for our researchers, be they librarians or attorneys, and how that data is used in their platforms.
And so you mentioned risk there, and I think that's probably going to be a focus in our discussion here. Why is this so important to be looking to? What kind of risks are there out there that could come from AI and using open data versus closed data? And where do those things come from? Where are the fault lines for me if I'm using artificial intelligence in this context?
Hallucinations are, obviously that's a very big risk when you're considering research, be it legal, financial, and that's where I mentioned the open versus closed model, in-house systems versus systems that are developed or maintained by vendors, or, systems that are just out there collecting data that's been, sliced and diced and potentially made up.
It's that misinformation area that I feel like information professionals have been struggling with for years now, could end up accelerating, right, with machine learning and those hallucination type things that you're talking about, where something that's actually not true is something that the machine is absolutely convinced that it is true. I was on one of these AI platforms a while ago, and I did what everyone does, right? I fed myself into it, and I was like, look, who is John Connolly? And the machine came back and said, adjunct professor at BYU. If you Google it, one John Connolly out there is adjunct professor at BYU. And I gave it my LinkedIn profile and I said, check this. And it said, nope, absolutely BYU professor. And it even went so far as to tell me, this post here, he says that he's an adjunct professor at BYU. And I asked it to read it, and then it came back and said, oh, actually, I was wrong. But it was telling me over and over again, nope, you're absolutely wrong. There's no set. I couldn't possibly be wrong about it. And then I got to admit it was wrong. And I went back one more time after that and said, who is John Connolly? And he said, adjunct professor at BYU. Like, it was, even after it admitted it was wrong, it was still giving out the wrong information. And I know these things vary. The ramifications of that could be very far.
I think the ramifications are, could be very dangerous. And what you have pointed out, in terms of just the answers that it was spewing were incorrect, and it was still, giving you an incorrect information about yourself is, it's a little frightening. I think the difference here, these open systems, specifically ChatGPT open, made false cases that attorneys actually used in the court of law in New York, right? And that really was terrible. And that attorney is now, from a perspective of not losing his license altogether, but, got him in trouble. And then obviously the client he was representing provided a lot of problems. But for some of the closed systems, as I mentioned, one of the major legal research providers in the field, they, if they don't have an answer, they will state that in their response. And I'll give you an example. In one of these AI tools that I was using, I put in the question, who owns the sky? And, that they gave me some reputable answers for that, in terms of who, there are jurisdictions out there in terms of the ownership of air, right? And has to do with the, different laws. And it gave me, very formidable data to back up that answer. Most information providers, in terms of, directors of research and research services for firms or even companies, they are looking for services that have that, risk management in place, as opposed to using just the open web to query these types of questions.
Right. So I can see kind of the shape, why you're looking at these things, right? Why you need to audit the vendors who are using these tools so that you can mitigate some of the risk, reduce some of the risk that might be from there. But AI, it's a tremendously useful tool, I will say. AI is a tremendously useful tool. Where can we thread the needle, right? The balance between risk and benefit there. What are some of the upsides in your profession that you can see from AI being available as a tool versus some of the risks we've been talking?
Yeah, I mean, one of the risks that we didn't mention here is the risk on our profession, right? AI is going to lead us to job losses in the information services sector, and I just don't think that's true, right? So, for potential benefit as information professionals, we can put our attention into writing and devising the best AI prompts, right, for research and educating our end users on best practice methods. And that's where I think it's right. Our profession is constantly changing, and we need to stay current, stay relevant, and learn how to use these tools, and not only learn how to use them, but how can we effectively teach them to others so that they're proficient in using them.
And I remember the advent of Google, and some, maybe most, of the librarian community was a little bit dubious about the utility of Google over the long term. And now we've kind of transcended that level of technology as well. I'm very interested in making sure that our profession does not get left behind, that we are as close to on the ground floor as possible, because I think we bring a lot of value in our training and in the tools and everything that we have available to us that can help make sure that some of these tools are reliably correct?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. And, obviously these tools are going to create some major efficiencies. How much time it takes to go through a legal research exercise, or maybe even a non-legal research exercise. And that could be, obviously it's going to be a benefit. It's going to be a benefit to, in terms of law firms, it's going to be a benefit to clients, but there's still, so much more to do in terms of, things that you could be concentrating on for that time that's been saved. There's certainly other areas of business and other, different avenues of research that you can be doing for clients. That could be much, welcome by the client.
And I'm still very dubious, I think, about relying on this tool. I think that it does not merit reliance. I think it can be very useful. I don't think that it should be relied upon, at least not yet, on its own. Where should we be putting our attention to get the most out of AI as a reliable resource? Like, does that need to be in closed systems and feeding it the right information? Is it prompting? What kinds of things should we have in our minds as this continues to evolve?
I think it's a combination of those. So, I think it certainly is closed systems for certain services. I know we've been concentrating on research, but I think, we also discussed, John, that these tools are really used outside of research centers. I mean, HR is going to be, it's already engulfed HR systems for hiring and marketing, obviously, too, in terms of drafting and writing and editing and graphics of pictures and all sorts of things. So I think it goes across, many different facets of a business organization. That's why doing a simple audit is helpful, because at least you have your ducks in a row and you have some answers from your vendors into, what they have and what they don't have, right? Like, do they have policies in place? Do they have any, papers or guidelines? What's their development over the next 12 to 24 months in this area? That's really important for, all business units that are going to be using AI or are using it now.
You talk about the cross functionality there, right? HR and marketing and sales and all of these different functions within an organization. And it just brings to mind information siloing. I guess in the context of this conversation, should those silos stay? I mean, I think we've talked about information siloing organization structure-wise as being a negative thing for a very long time, but should we preserve our information silos in order to keep these systems closed?
At least, with law firms, we have a general counsel, right? Where we ask these sorts of questions, and it's very important to rely on them for their opinion. And obviously some of this, systems and services might be better suited closed, depending on the business needs and requirements, the discussion among it, right? The auditing or what's going on with your vendors in these spaces. What types of checks and balances do they have? That type of information, I think, can certainly go across, right? The businesses, especially when we're talking about, proprietary information going into, right? SaaS services. What's, right? What's, what's their tests? What in terms of fairness, are they doing bias auditing? Is that stuff being undertaken by product developers, especially from the HR side? I think, IT plays a big, important space in this area as well. Working with your IT colleagues on this from the security and data privacy perspective.
If people want to learn more about the kind of auditing you're doing, or maybe even begin doing their own auditing within their own fields, where's a good place to start?
Taking a look at some of the organizations that we have in place. ILTA for law firms and university, law schools. That's I think a very good organization to take a look at. They will have some frameworks. There's definitely some good articles out there on the web on doing audits. Some of them might be, very in depth. I concentrated mine, and as I mentioned to you earlier, I worked with my general counsel on it. We just took those principles that I mentioned at the beginning of our discussion: human oversight, transparency, fairness, data privacy, and security, and just asking each vendor, are systems in place on this? Yes, no. NA not applicable. We don't have AI for this.
Right.
And then I just kind of take a look at how many vendors are saying yes, how many of them are said no. It's very right easy ranking or rating. I'm sure that there might be more sophisticated audits in place depending on the system or the service it's supporting.
Robyn, how can people get in touch with you or look you up? And if they want to learn more, I know we've given them some resources here, but I'm sure people are going to be very interested to know, as you continue this and how it develops, as the technology itself evolves, what's a good way for people to get up with you?
Oh, I think the best way is on LinkedIn. I'm involved in some local groups and associations, but I think LinkedIn is probably the best way to get in touch with me. Send me a LinkedIn connection. That's probably the best way.
Well, Robyn, thank you so much for joining us again. I'm really pleased with the discussion, and I hope that we can learn more in the future about the auditing process that you're going through.
Thank you, John.
This has been Vertical File by Sutron Global. If you enjoyed this show, please rate us 5 stars wherever you find your podcasts. Check us out online at www.sutron.com.